Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. We're super excited to continue this M365 virtual marathon. We have Ricardo Wilkins with us right now that will be talking about the 9 OneNote notes for Ninja users. So, Ricardo, whenever you're ready, you're up next. Thanks, everybody.
All right, thank you. And hello, everyone, wherever you may be. Again, Ricardo Wilkins here. As mentioned, I'll be talking about OneNote. Hopefully there's some OneNote fanatics out there, and that's why you're here. OneNote's been around a long time, but if you're like me, you've been fanatical about it for a long time, and hopefully this presentation, will be useful for you. Let me kind of go ahead here. I know there's an About Me slide, but we go through some of these slides first. So again, remember and mark your calendars for the M365 Collaboration Conference coming up next year. So that's an important one. Definitely a thanks to all our sponsors. Sponsors make these kind of events happen. So we have those here on that slide. We thank them for all of their help as part of this. Also, don't forget about the raffle, giving away the 3 Oculus Quests. I actually happen to have that device myself. It's a great device, so that's a very nice raffle. So be sure to submit your answers to enter the raffle there. And then also, of course, consider donating to these charities and the great work being done here, United Way and International Medical Corps. You see the links there as well. More information is at the email address there that you see. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about who I am. Ricardo Wilkins. I do work for Microsoft as Customer Success Manager in Modern Workplace. This essentially means I'm an adoption specialist. I help customers leverage the tools that they invest in terms of Microsoft products, cloud services specifically. And I am in Ohio in the USA, United States, and most of my career has been, well, all of my career really has been in IT. A lot of it as a actual developer and deliverer, delivery of software solutions. Also done trainings, speaking, and now currently an adoption specialist and customer success manager. What I geek out on, it'll kind of be obvious that I geek out on OneNote, but also, as part of my job, I geek out on Teams specifically. Also, SharePoint has been a large part of my career. I've been as a consultant and SharePoint architect, and then Surface devices too are a favorite of mine. So I could talk all day long about any one of those things, but I'll try to keep it specific to OneNote with a little bit of Surface sprinkled in there. And I do blog about a lot of the things that I geek out on. There's a couple of sites. There's probably a couple more that I have out there, but Teamwork Cowbell for all things Teams, really, and SharePoint Cowbell for all things SharePoint. So feel free to check those out. So what we'll talk about today, obviously, is OneNote, but I will start with a few disclaimers just to get us on the same page, and then I will talk through 9 notes or tips and tricks related to OneNote, and then hopefully there'll be time for some Q&A. I think feel free to put Q&A in the put your questions in the chat at any time. I think I'll try to address them more towards the end, just to make sure I can get through all 9 of the notes here. So from a disclaimers perspective, so I do work at Microsoft. However, I'm not on OneNote engineering or I don't do OneNote specifically. So I am coming more as an enthusiast of OneNote long before I was at OneNote. Long before I was even a SharePoint consultant. I mean, long before I was at Microsoft, long before I was a consultant with SharePoint, I was just a user of OneNote. And so it's been, many, many years that I've just been addicted to OneNote. I have lots of notebooks that have all of my career notes, personal notes, and all those things. So I just want to, make it clear I'm coming from that perspective, just a OneNote fan. I'm not speaking for OneNote engineering or anything like that. So I wanted to just make that clear. The other disclaimer here is in the past when I've talked about OneNote, I've done a lot of talking relative to OneNote for Windows versus OneNote Desktop, and I'll do that a little today. However, I tend to not make as big a deal about those differences for a couple reasons. One is, they've done such a great job of putting what was in the desktop version that we've had for so many years into the Windows version. But also, as was announced at Ignite, there is a longer term plan to really bring those two together. And so, I imagine a day where we won't really have to talk about the differences per se. So I don't know that we know exactly what that convergence, as I'm calling it there, will look like. But again, there is a vision for that, and that gets talked about in the session at Ignite that I am referencing there. And then the other disclaimer is, again, this session isn't about, it really isn't for, I've never heard of OneNote, what is it, right? It's more about you know OneNote, you've probably used it. I'm not going to do any kind of 101 what is OneNote pieces, but it's more about, as you're already a user, maybe even a fanatic, hopefully I can come and show you some things you maybe hadn't thought about before, or didn't know that OneNote could do. So those are the kind of tips that I'm trying to bring out, not so much how do you do some of the basic features. I'm hoping to kind of dazzle you with potentially new things. So those are what I'm calling those nifty notes, or really tips and tricks. So hopefully that kind of gets us on the same page and gets the expectations, in the right perspective. So really, let's just jump right in, right? I'm going to go through 9, and I don't know that I ordered them by, to all the way to the most amazing, but I gave it a shot. So I'll start here with number 9. Number 9 is Onetastic. So if you haven't heard of that, that's the URL there. And Onetastic is a plugin or add-in that, at least for right now, is for the desktop version. I don't know if there's plans for the makers of Onetastic to make it an add-in to the Windows version of OneNote. But right now it would be a part of the desktop version. I'm going to show that here for a sec. Onetastic, has a lot of things in it, macros and whatnot. And here I brought up OneNote desktop version. So it has a lot of different macros it can do. For me specifically, without going into a lot of what it is, I just wanted to bring up the Onetastic calendar, or the One calendar here. If nothing else, I would say install it to your desktop just for this. And maybe it just kind of depends on how you like to see your notes. But what I like is, as I click that button from that Onetastic add-in, it brought up a calendar that basically showing me a month view, and every page in my notebook, or notebooks really, it can look across multiple ones. It's showing me the day, what notes are a part of that day. So I like this for example, when I say that, I know I had a meeting on Wednesday, I know I took notes in that meeting, but I can't remember which of my many notebooks I put it in. So that becomes useful for me. I'll just look at that date. I'll see, let's say it was Thursday the 28th, and I'll see it in there. And there's even, previews. As I kind of hover over the particular page, I get a preview of that page to some degree. You can see it's a little tiny thumbnail. So again, imagine if this is kind of my demo environment here, but in my real environment, I've got, dozens of notebooks, and all of these days are just filled with the different pages that represent those days. So I just love this view. Obviously, we have the history view, or even the recent view in OneNote for Windows. But for me, there's something about that calendar view that is just very super useful. And obviously, you can go by week or by a specific day. You have some other options there as well. So Onetastic is cool for a lot of reasons. I'm just being specific to that one for now, just for the sake of brevity. The other piece that to me is useful for Onetastic is the crop feature, because I don't think that's in the Windows or OneNote for Windows 10, nor is it in native desktop version. And by crop, I mean on it, when I have an image like this one here and I right click, Onetastic gives me the crop option here. Maybe you don't crop images much, but I really like that. I crop images a lot, actually. And so this does kind of let me, crop at the top and bottom and whatever I need, hit accept, and then you can see it automatically crops it there. Again, that, maybe you've never had a need to crop it, I crop all the time, and so that's a big deal. So I literally keep OneTastic installed just for those two features alone, even though it does have a ton of other cool features. So because of that, I thought it was worth mentioning in terms of a nifty note for you. Right now, it's one of the reasons why, even though OneNote for Windows 10 is really great, and the feature parity is great, the add-ins aren't there, and so I love OneTastic, and so I'm gonna have to keep that desktop going for a little while longer. So that's number 9. Number 8 is the just the idea, if it wasn't already clear, of the idea of an infinite page. That when you have a OneNote, while you may be seeing an 8x10 or some landscape kind of a page, that's just the beginning, right? It can go as long or as wide or as long as you need it to. And so this screenshot here, you're not meant to be able to read the handwriting there. What I'm really trying to show is this is an actual page back in my consulting days from an actual meeting with a customer. So this is just kind of how my mind works. So I always tend to use a pen, a touchscreen, Windows 10, like a Surface. And so in my meetings, I'm literally writing my notes with the pen on OneNote. The red square there kind of represents a typical page that you would see on your screen. So that kind of lets you know how far out of the typical page I went. I certainly didn't just keep going straight down like a maybe a Word doc or something. I went to the side. I went a little diagonal. There's things in there like highlights and screenshots and some other things. So my mind works that way. I just keep flowing and keep doing arrows left to left and right, whatever. And so OneNote lets me do that. Lets my mind continue to flow. So that's just something to keep in mind, is that unlike maybe some other note-taking tools, OneNote, I think, really gives you some freedom, if your mind works the way mine does, to just freely continue to go without those kind of guardrails about staying top to bottom or anything like that. So I think that's pretty cool. When you based on that, if I were to come over here, let's say right to desktop, this feature is in both versions, but as part of that, imagine having all of those notes, but then needing some additional space to the left, right? So clearly I can keep going to the right, keep going down, but what if I really wish I had some to the left or even to the top? Hopefully you know about the insert space button. By clicking that, I can come over here to the side, and it will literally push everything that's on that page, even that large one I just showed you. Push everything, gives me some space on the side, or even push it, everything down, right? So again, that seems real simple from the little bit of content that's on this page, but again, imagine that page I just showed you, all of that content. I wouldn't want to have to lasso all of my handwriting and then move it over, but with that insert space button, it very easily lets me give myself some additional space. So then essentially I can almost go infinitely to the left as opposed to the right as well, or up and down. So an infinite page, I think, is at least useful for anyone whose brain is like mine. It just wants to keep going and wants to be free, right? So the infinite page is number 8. Number 7 is this concept of handwriting in OneNote. You would have to be a user of either a stylus or a digital pen to really maybe fully take advantage of this, right? You can certainly write on OneNote, on a touchscreen device with your finger, with a stylus, or with an actual, active digitizer pen. The pen is going to give you the most precision. We'll talk about the pen more in one of the other notes. And with that precision then comes the ability for my handwriting on that device to look just like my handwriting would on paper. And that's what we're looking at here, that's literally my handwriting. But what we're also seeing is that OneNote can read my handwriting. And so if you're familiar with OneNote, if you write something on that kind of subject line in the page, OneNote will try to take that and put that, as the title of the page in that section. So what we're seeing here is that It successfully, I mean, I didn't, you have to trust me, I didn't finagle anything here, but you can see the title, How Does This Work? That's exactly what I wrote. You will probably agree though that the way I wrote it, that's, you know, relatively sloppy. That's not the you know, the most elegant handwriting, but OneNote read it perfectly. And I've got other examples I've used in the past of some of my kind of sloppy handwriting. My classic one is the ing that I just have a long squiggly and then a loop that represents ing, and OneNote seems to read that just fine. So it's pretty amazing, its ability to read handwriting. I can't even explain what magic is happening to make that work. But because it works, you know, again, I've got years of my handwritten notes with, you know, pen and device. And because of that, I keep all my handwriting as handwriting. Many people will, you know, take handwritten notes in meetings and then go later and clean it up by, you know, circling their handwriting and then selecting change to text, right? To just give it, to make it text, which makes sense. I think if you want to give that to someone else, so you don't want them to have to read your handwriting, you can read the text. So even that process is depending on the OneNote being able to read handwriting. But again, since most of my notes are just for me, I keep it as handwriting, knowing that if I were to do a search in OneNote for my handwriting, let's say I wrote the word SharePoint, now I want to search everywhere that SharePoint occurs in my notebooks, it's going to find even my, you know, the word SharePoint that I wrote with my hand because it can read that handwriting. So overwhelmingly, most of my notes are my original handwriting. Lots of articles that kind of talk about, you know, the value of seeing your handwriting in your notes and the recognition or recollection capabilities that gives you from remembering what happened in the meeting. So I take advantage of this feature for that. So it's pretty amazing. Try that out. Try your most not your sloppiest, but, you know, try your sloppiest handwriting and see if it can read it. I will say, writing on the lines, you know, OneNote can put rule lines on the page. Writing on the lines will certainly help the accuracy. You may be like me, I tend to want to write slanted, and that's certainly fine too, and it'll do its best. But I think writing on the lines will really help it to be able to recognize the text that you put in there. So just a little tip there as well. Maybe that's 7.5 tip. But handwriting, again, that's a useful feature there. Tip number 6, Power Automate, previously known as Flow. You may not have known that there were OneNote connectors there to help us automate some things in as relates to our OneNote notebooks. And so I'm showing a few here. The first 3 are some of the triggers that are in Power Automate for OneNote. So I can trigger a Power Automate flow when a new section is created in one of my notebooks, a page is created in a section, or when a new section group is created. So that can be useful as well. And then in terms of what actions can I do, we can see here several actions like creating a section in a notebook, or getting all your notebooks, or you know, or even updating page content. Okay, so that's some useful things here. And again, for me, you know, whenever I talk about Power Automate, to me, I think its power comes from your creativity. You know, what we certainly have templates that are built in there to kind of give you some ideas about what things you can create. But again, as you look at these triggers and look at these actions, then it's kind of like, what could I do with that that could be useful to me? One thing I kind of just thought of, I don't really use this myself, but as I was just thinking through potential use cases, for instance, here, I could make a flow that fires off when a new planner in Office 365, let's say a new task is created. And as a result of the task being created, maybe I want to create a page in a section based on that task. And then maybe the next step is to update the new task with maybe a link to that page. You know, maybe that's just, you know, every time our team has a task, I want a page, you know, dedicated to that task. And so I'm kind of automating that process, you know, so that's a potential, you know, use there. Again, you're only limited by your creativity here. There's certainly plenty of other connectors that could work in conjunction with OneNote, with the OneNote connectors there. Try to go back here. Go back. Yeah. So yeah, Power Automate. Just give it a try. See if any of that is useful. Some of the other automation before Power Automate came along, it used to be a time, I don't know if we still do it, where you could email, directly into a OneNote notebook, things like that. So lots of ways to potentially automate what you're doing with your notebooks, but Power Automate is definitely, as you can see, a good tool for being able to do that. All right, so let's jump to number 5. OneNote versus Whiteboard. Okay, so Whiteboard is, I'm going to open it here, a Windows 10 or an application that is used on our Surface Hubs, but does kind of what the name implies, right? Allows you to have a whiteboard experience. So you can see here that I kind of fired one up. And I can do some basic things, right? I can write in ink. So imagine being on a Surface, a large Surface Hubs with that pen and writing your notes. Everyone else on your team could be a part of this this whiteboard experience. They could be doing their own notes. We could see it in real time. I could certainly make some text here. Move the page around, zoom in and out, all that good stuff. Gets fancy as I start bringing images in and grouping them and moving them around. I can put little notes, on different places here. So if you are a OneNote user, you'll see some similarities to some of this functionality, right? There is a unique feature, for instance, of creating a table with your ink. So as I start to kind of draw out a table, it will kind of turn it into a true table and automatically turn my ink within that table into text. So very cool things there. But I do get the question a lot, especially depending on what kind of tenant you're in. Again, Teams is what I focus on these days, and some people are still waiting for whiteboard integration into their Teams tenant. And if it's not there, what can I do in the meantime? A lot of my customers are state and local government. What can I do in the meantime while I wait for whiteboard integration? And what we tend to have that conversation of, well, OneNote has been around for a while, is still there, and can do these features as well. A lot of things are, just done a little bit differently. So obviously your OneNote notebook is a whiteboard as well, and you can just share out during a Teams meeting or any kind of meeting. Really, just share your desktop, share your OneNote, and ink away and do all those same things. Subtle differences, and some. OneNote certainly has a lot more capabilities than Whiteboard. It's very specific to that whiteboard experience. So as I compare them, it's really not a matter of which one is better per se. To me, it's a preference. Obviously, if you are using a whiteboard on a Surface Hub, then the Whiteboard app is what you're going to use. If you're having a meeting, a Teams meeting with a remote team, and you just need something to whiteboard with, or to use your pen with, you've got two options. I will say, the Whiteboard app that we're looking at here, very smooth in terms of its pen capabilities. As your writing is very real time to the other users. I happen to make these particular marks with my mouse, but if I were to use my pen, a very fluid experience, just like in OneNote. So when I do use the Whiteboard app in a meeting, I tend to use the native app versus the integrated piece, just because I'm always using a pen and I want that more fluid experience. So something to consider. So again, I'm not here to say whether one is better than the other. It kind of depends on your need and really on your preference, and maybe what you're doing in that moment. But the main point I wanted to make there is that OneNote can be a whiteboard, just like the Whiteboard app. It has been a whiteboard type app for a long time. So that's the main point there, is in that comparison to Whiteboard. Okay. So number 4, I was kind of alluding to that, and as I was just talking there, Teams integration with OneNote. So we just mentioned, and I won't bring up my Teams client here. In a meeting, obviously, you can share your desktop or share a window in a meeting, and that window can certainly be OneNote. And so that's how it can be integrated into a meeting. And so anything I write or do on my OneNote that I'm sharing out can be seen. If I am having a meeting with people who are part of my team in Teams, and I'm sharing a notebook, that is in the files area of that, like this test 1, 2, 3. What's nice about Teams is knowing that, everybody in the team, has the same access, ability to see and interact with that notebook. So yes, I may be the one doing the desktop share of that notebook, and everyone may be watching my share, but they could certainly open that notebook. They all have access to it, get inside of it, also be doing real-time edits as well. OneNote was like the first, app to really do real, co-authoring, real-time co-authoring, and long before Office became really a thing in Office, and so that still applies, right? So one person could be sharing, but really the whole meeting, if we're all part of the same team, we could be in that notebook working collectively on it. So that's a sort of an integration there, but really the main integration that I was referring to is the tab for OneNote here. And so again, for long-term OneNote users, this is pretty awesome, because a lot of times the challenges we've had as OneNote notebook owners has been by way of sharing our notes with others. There was there's often times where you want to share one page of a big notebook. And while I don't think the single page sharing is a feature today, this tab experience helps in that I'm sharing a notebook. In this case, it's a notebook that the whole team already has access to. But as you can see, I don't just share the notebook. It's not just a tab to the notebook, and then I still have to go navigating to whatever page it is that I'm interested in. You can see that I can go all the way down to the page level. I'll just use this one as an example, and I can save that. And so that tab is now not just a tab to the notebook, but a tab to a specific page in the notebook. So again, if the meeting notes from last Tuesday's meeting are in the notebook and you want to make that conveniently available to everyone on the team, this lets you do that. I click now, one click on that tab, and I go right to that page. I certainly still have access to the whole notebook, as you can see here. I can go anywhere else and interact with it here in Teams, but that's a pretty big deal, depending on how much you use OneNote and how much you tend to try to share it, that ability to share a specific page. So it's very convenient, just going there with one click. I don't have to leave Teams to see it. I can certainly continue to open this in the app, but if I want to, I could just check out those Tuesday minutes right there in the tab. So that's a very convenient thing. Also convenient too to just be able to use it to also with the same clicks start up a new notebook, right? And it just automatically gets stored in the files area. So that's very convenient as well. We certainly could just come to files, go to new, make a new notebook there, or go over into SharePoint and do it. But again, it's very nice and convenient to have that, in there. And then just that elegant way that it shows it to you right within Teams without having to open up a browser or going anywhere else is pretty useful. You can also edit the notebook, within Teams as well. Even if you need to do handwriting, again, it's not as fluid as opening up the native app, but it does work. So it's a very useful feature. Again, I think those of us that have been using OneNote for a long time, trying to share, appreciate that tab even more. Let me jump back for a second, because I forgot about the other integration piece. If we come over here to the apps, you'll see that there is a OneNote app, and it's really a way to give me access to my convenient access to all of my notebooks and Teams, right? So recent notebooks that I may have been in, I think this one, oh, that was working now. Basically notebooks across the teams that I'm in. So with one app, I kind of get a landing page for all things that I, need to do with my notebooks, or at least to be able to get at them, to kind of know where their locations are and things like that. So you do have a dedicated app there, very similar to the OneNote kind of app on your Office 365 landing page. So those would be kind of the two main integrations, I would say, related to OneNote and Teams. Okay. So that's number 4. Number 3 is embedding video, or really, it's really embedding different kinds of things, but we'll keep it simple to video. If I come back here to, let's go to my OneNote, OneNote for Windows 10. You see here, I got this one called Stream, and so you can see here that in the page is actually an embedded video, which actually does play in the page itself, right? So we're actually playing it, and so that could be playing while I am, taking notes. I mean, imagine if this was a training video and I wanted to watch it while taking notes. I could be writing ink again, side by side with this playing video. So that's pretty useful. And the way that comes about is that there are a few types of assets that OneNote will be able to kind of convert into a live thumbnail. So in my case, I went over to Stream, found that video, and just found the URL for it. So I copied that and I come over to OneNote here. And once I paste it, you see it thinks about it for half a second and then decides to turn that into a live, thumbnail. All right. And so there's a few things that this can be done for, and I really should have. There's a list out there somewhere. There's about 20 different things. Things like Sway, if you use that. Things like Vimeo videos. Also, even PowerPoint online, right? So I don't know if I can find that quickly, but in fact, let me give it a quick shot. If I come here to PowerPoint, is there any? Of course, I don't have one quickly available. But if I were to put the URL to a PowerPoint, online PowerPoint deck, it would actually put that in there as well, to the point that I could even page through the presentation. And again, just very similar to the video. So that's useful as well, again, from a training perspective or whatever it may be. So we could certainly put links to PowerPoint. We could drag the PowerPoint into the page and just open it up when we need it. But the idea of putting it in there with a live thumbnail that I could page through, it's pretty convenient. As you'd imagine, that is assuming you've got an internet connection. So I don't think that's going to get it done if you're trying to, travel and watch a video in OneNote. It's not like it has downloaded the video into the OneNote page. So it's dependent on the connection there. But again, a pretty useful feature. Like I said, if you do a search, there's a short list of other things that can be embedded. The only ones I can remember: Vimeo and YouTube, another obvious one. Vimeo, YouTube, Sway, Stream, PowerPoint, and those are the ones I can remember. But even that list alone, it should be pretty useful. So again, especially like if you're in a team that records your meetings often, and you'd like to have the meeting recording, the Teams meeting recording side by side with your notes from that meeting, once that recording has occurred, grabbing that Stream URL, popping it next to your notes, and then having, again, that call, that meeting side by side with your notes could be pretty useful. So, yeah, embedding, again, in this case, we're talking about video, but again, it's really things like Sway and PowerPoint and other things besides video can go in there as well. So that's pretty useful. Number 2, migrating notebooks to the cloud. And so my note here comes from the fact that I've had this question come up surprisingly often among my customers and folks who are using OneNote, especially these days. So kind of let's think about the bigger story, right? OneNote's been around for a while. Many of us have committed a lot of our notes to it. Most of that has been done in the desktop app. Depending on how long you've been using it, you may still be using a notebook that maybe is stored on your network drive in your organization, and it's not yet in the cloud. And maybe you're using a local copy, things like that. These days, the cloud versions, I mean, it's just awesome to have that stuff in the cloud, syncing across devices. The confidence of it, being in the cloud, anywhere access versus being on a network share. I've got a VPN in or a local machine that where my hard drive could crash. So more and more people are starting to move their notebooks to the cloud, but sometimes they're finding challenges there. Now there is some documentation out there about a kind of a point and click process of migrating or moving moving a notebook to the cloud. And while that may work, OneNote really is more of a manual process is what I usually suggest when customers ask me about it. Tends to work, even though it's manual. It gives us some confidence in terms of the fact that the process occurred properly. And what I essentially do or recommend is to say this notebook was a local one and I wanted to put it in the cloud. How do I do that? It's not like I can save as and necessarily choose a cloud location. What I like to do is actually make the new notebook in the cloud, and that's what I did here with test 1, 2, 3, which you can see here is the notebook that's here in this team. So I make the notebook first in the cloud location, nice and blank, but at least I know it's there, it's working. And then I go back to the notebook that I want to move to the cloud, and I just manually, right click, move, copy, and copy section by section the particular areas that I want into the notebook. And I first thing I know you're saying, my notebook's huge and it's going to take a while, and that's true. Only to me, the benefit of this is just for someone like me, my notebooks are really important. I don't want them to be damaged in a migration kind of effort. This one is just a very safe way for me to do it. I'm doing a copy. My original is still intact. I don't have to delete the original until I can see that the copy is correctly in the cloud with no issues. I'm literally seeing it happen section by section. So again, it is a very manual effort for sure. There's no dazzle or nothing fancy about this, but what it really gives me is that confidence. And so without this process, there's also some other things that come along with it that you run into. Again, if you're a longtime OneNote user, depending on how old your notebook is, there could be challenges with some of the out-of-the-box ways of migrating to the cloud. So you may have to, if you've got, for instance, an old like OneNote 2007 notebook, you may need to upgrade it, I think, to 2010 first before you start to kind of make those changes. So there's some nuances to this, but again, because of all those nuances, I just really like the approach of doing it manually, one section at a time. And you're right, it does there for some of my large notebooks, it does take some time, but at the end of it, I feel very confident. I can see the original, I can see the new one, they're good to go. And then I may make the decision to delete the old and keep the new, but it's only because I know the new one is rock solid. So again, there's probably a half dozen ways to get this done, but that is the one that I like just from the confidence perspective. So that migration of the notebook for me is a tip there. And from that perspective, I would say, I would recommend getting your notebooks into the cloud. You certainly, if you're not on Office 365, even a live account, with the free storage that's there, you certainly have plenty of clouds or opportunities to put something in the cloud. And so I would really recommend it. I think sync and ability to get it across devices, really works well in the cloud. Cloud just seems to make everything work better. I've certainly had challenges with local notebooks, notebooks on network shares. And so again, cloud's great. And if you want to migrate to it, that's my recommendation. It's not the only way, again, but it's a way, and it's one that I find pretty useful. So that is Notebook Cloud Migrations. And then my number one tip is basically all about the pen. So let me make some, kind of make some definitions here first off. So as I said earlier, OneNote will take, you can use your fingertip and write. You could use a stylus, which to me is a kind of an extension or an imitation of my finger, or a pen is what I would call a digital device with that pen-like precision. And as we can see here with the Surface Pen, there's certainly lots of pens out there. I'll really be talking about the Surface Pen specifically. But again, any pen out there, again, is that it's precise writing. It's not necessarily a stylus per se, and it's not your finger, right? So the pen really makes OneNote come alive. I mean, OneNote is useful if you never do one piece of handwriting or ink, digital ink. But when you start using it for digital ink, it exponentially becomes more useful, in my opinion. So while the Surface Pen is new, pens in general are not. They've been around a long time. Touchscreen, laptops have been around a while, and tablets. And what has been also around a while is this concept of digital ink in Windows. And we've certainly gotten better over time, but the concept is still there. So what I mean by that is, well, some other tools will certainly let me do markings in their app, right? Can I, is it vectored graphics, right? Can I expand it without losing fidelity? Can it read the handwriting? So again, that's the difference between what I would call ink versus a marking that my finger made on some app, right? So the pen really helps to make that precision writing experience, a reality, and the Surface Pen specifically, as we're kind of seeing here. The Surface Pen with a Surface device allows you to do some things related to the button on the top. And if those looking at the video here, this is a Surface Pen with a button on the top. And so depending on, I can make settings that change what happens when I click that button. One of the most interesting things is in the second screenshot, this ability to have a Surface device. Let's say I'm, working here with my, Surface Go, right? And to be able to click the button and even from a black screen, right, to wake up the device and get a OneNote page open for me without even unlocking the device. So, I can write my note and whatnot, but the device is still locked. I'm only basically allowed to enter that page. But that's super useful, right, to be able to flip it open, hit the button, write a note, close it, and be on without passwords and pins and all this good stuff. So that's very specific to the Surface Pen and Surface devices, or Windows 10 devices, I should say. I'm going to, let me come over here to show you a few more things related to the pen. So what I'll do here is a quick jump to another screen share. Coming right back to you. I'm going to switch over to this guy. And so I think you should now be seeing my OneNote application. And so while you can't necessarily see, you can kind of see it through the video me writing, but I just kind of wanted to show the fluidness of, the ability to write on here. What the Surface device is letting me do, which again isn't clear here, is resting my palm on the glass, which is a very big deal, again, as it's trying to emulate me actually writing on an actual page with an actual pen. So again, it's not that I have to kind of hold this up, kind of with no fingers or anything touching the glass, right? I can hold this just as I normally would, rest my palm on it, and get very nice, writing experience. You should also be able to kind of notice here the pressure sensitivity that's going on here. Again, all of this is in OneNote. This is OneNote for Windows 10, but I'm getting pressure sensitivity, which I can adjust elsewhere in the settings here. And I can certainly put some rule lines on, as I mentioned earlier, to make sure that I can write on the line to help OneNote be able to read my handwriting. So the pen is super cool here. What's also cool, again, as I mentioned, digital ink is, the ability, I'm lassoing this and using my finger to, make it bigger. And hopefully what you're seeing there is that it's keeping the fidelity of that digital ink, right? So I'm making it bigger here with my finger, and it's not like it's getting jagged or anything. It's keeping those nice smooth lines. So that's the difference between maybe a marking with a stylus versus the pen here. So lots of cool things. I've got some videos out there where I kind of talk about, if we were using as a whiteboard, and let's say these were bullet points, and I wish I could have put a bullet point in here. Well, now I can lasso my ink, move it down, and then I can continue to, do some more bullet points. I can make these and change the colors to something else, very easily. Highlights, I've got this full palette of different highlights and colors and all those kind of things. So to me, that's super useful. Again, I love the pen, and so my blog, I got blog sites out there where I am, showing the blog sites and videos where I'm showing some of the features of the pen. So that's my number one tip for OneNote, is the power of the pen. If you have a pen or Surface device, or even really just a Windows 10 device with pen, explore that. Check out some of my videos for other ideas on how to use that. I think it's just super great. So that's it. That's the 9 tips. I could really talk all day about OneNote, but I tried to keep it to 9. Definitely, hopefully give some speaker feedback. And I think we got a few minutes here if there are questions from Q&A that I can potentially answer. I think we got time for that.
Yes, we definitely have a couple of questions in the Q&A. The first one is probably from a lefty here. Is there any way to put the right notebook bar to the left of OneNote?
The notebook bar. So I think you're kind of talking about like this here. Is that what they're?
I think it's more the right area where you have the add new page. On the right side, yeah. This one. Oh. Can it be on the left?
I believe so. I'm trying to remember. I think that might be in options and yeah, navigation bar appears on the left. Page tabs appear on the left. I think that may be it. There we go. Now I've basically swapped it, but yep. But yeah, there is options for that. Yep.
Cool. Another question was, can more than one person collaborate on a whiteboard live in a meeting setting, like you would do during a virtual breakout room activity?
Yeah, so whether it's OneNote or Whiteboard, they both have that capability of multiple people being in a notebook. Now, Whiteboard does make it a lot clearer. You'll get the bubble heads of everybody that's in the meeting, and it'll probably feel a lot more real time. OneNote is really syncing regularly, and so you'll get people's edits, depending on, I guess, internet connections, a few seconds after they do it. Whiteboard's pretty good at it being almost instantaneous. So Whiteboard will feel a little more fluid to that, but both of them really do have the concept of co-authoring in real time. It's just Whiteboard's a little more real time. But yes, Whiteboard, I think right now it's still specific to people in your organization. But yes, all your team members in your org could jump in here and be working collaboratively. Same thing with OneNote. I don't think you get the bobbleheads per se of who's in it, but we could all be in it working collaboratively.
Cool. From a security standpoint, can we restrict the access to a single page instead of giving access to a team to the entire notebook?
So generally when you're sharing a notebook, it is the whole notebook. I'm trying to remember. I think there may be, there's passwords per section. I don't think there's a password per page. So I could, I'd share a notebook with you, but then put a password on a section that you couldn't get into without that password. But that's kind of what I was alluding to earlier, that the sharing concept for the notebook has been a challenge. When I want to share certain parts, it's usually an all or nothing kind of thing. So you get the password concept, but usually you're sharing with someone trusted where, yes, I'm pointing you to this page, but technically, yes, you got access to all the rest. So kind of a yes and no there, I guess.
Excellent. You showed earlier kind of integrations with video and documents. Is there a way to edit the documents? In that case, it's a question around PowerPoint that would be embedded within OneNote.
So yeah, that seems to suggest like basically a thumbnail that is giving me edit capabilities, which I don't think that's the intent of that feature. It's really that a read-only kind of piece. I'm trying not to speak out of turn, but I think the Fluid framework may be, kind of that is an up and coming thing. That might be the vision that's really kind of going for. But yeah, what I was showing you here with these embedded links that turn into the thumbnails, I don't think that's for the editing experience. I think that's mostly for just the viewing or consuming experience.
Makes sense. And we'll answer one last question live, and the rest I'll let you answer them afterwards while we switch speaker. But the last question will be, is there a way to print OneNote pages with PDF and attachments that allow it to align with printing page sections?
If you're like me and you saw the page I did where my notes were going like crazy, then no, I'll never have a great printing experience with notes like that. If you are neater than I am and kind of go top to bottom, more traditionally, then I think your printing could come out okay. So it's kind of a maybe is the answer to that, right? It just depends on what your content looks like. If you got images that would span potential pages, it may or may not come out quite nicely. But again, if you make your notes a little more traditional, down the up and down, kind of staying in that 8x10 kind of a framework, they should come out a little better. There is an option, so that's the PDF, which is going to be pages. There is an option to export as I think it's an MHTL, which really keeps it all together, but it's not really a standard format, maybe not as easily shareable, but it is one that even for my notes would kind of keep it all together. So I tend to use that sometimes, but PDF just depends on how your notes look.
Awesome. Well, Ricardo, thank you so much. I learned a ton of stuff in your session, so that's all. That's really cool. Big user, didn't know anything about what you were saying, so it's really cool. I learned a lot. Hope you guys also enjoyed it. Ricardo, you're good to go now.
All right, thank you.